There is a lawsuit happening right now that breaks every rule about how government is supposed to work. And the reason it breaks every rule is that the person suing the government is also the person running the government. And when asked about this obvious problem, the President of the United States said, and this is a direct quote, "I am supposed to work out a settlement with myself. The President is suing his own administration for $10 billion and plans to settle the case with himself." And if that sounds insane, if that sounds like something that would never be allowed in a functioning democracy, you are right. Which is why yesterday, February 12th, 2026, according to CREW, Citizens for Responsibility and Ethics in Washington, 2 watchdog organizations filed an amicus brief in federal court demanding that a judge block this entire scheme before it becomes a $10 billion transfer of taxpayer money into Donald Trump's personal bank account. Now, let me tell you exactly what is happening here, because the details make it even worse. According to CREW's filing and reporting from NBC News, ABC News, Newsweek, and Bloomberg, on January 29th, 2026, President Trump, his sons Donald Jr. and Eric, and the Trump Organization filed a lawsuit in U.S. District Court for the Southern District of Florida. They are suing the Internal Revenue Service and the Treasury Department for at least $10 billion in damages. Their claim is that the IRS failed to prevent Charles Littlejohn, a contractor, from leaking Trump's tax returns to the New York Times and ProPublica between 2018 and 2020. Now, Charles Littlejohn already pleaded guilty to this leak in 2023. He was sentenced to 5 years in prison. This is not disputed. The leak happened. Littlejohn was prosecuted and convicted. But here is the problem. Trump is now the president, which means Trump controls the executive branch, which means Trump controls the Department of Justice, which means Trump controls the lawyers who are supposed to defend the IRS and Treasury Department in this lawsuit. So Trump is the plaintiff demanding $10 billion. And Trump is also the boss of the defendants who would have to pay that $10 billion. Trump is suing himself. And according to his own words reported by ABC News and NBC News, Trump acknowledges this. Quote, "I am supposed to work out a settlement with myself." That is what he said on February 2nd when reporters asked him about the obvious conflict. And here is where it gets even more explicit. According to CREW's amicus brief filed yesterday, Attorney General Pam Bondi has publicly stated that the Department of Justice, quote, "works at the directive of Donald Trump and will never stop fighting for him and for our country. Never stop fighting for him." The Attorney General said that out loud on the record. So the DOJ, which is supposed to defend the government in this lawsuit, has an Attorney General who says she works at Trump's directive and will never stop fighting for him. And Trump is the plaintiff suing for $10 billion. Do you see the problem? According to the CREW brief and reporting from Common Dreams and Democracy Forward, this creates what legal experts call collusive litigation. That is when both sides of a lawsuit are actually working together instead of against each other. It threatens the integrity of the judicial process because the court could be tricked into approving something that looks like a legitimate legal settlement, but is actually just a scheme to transfer public money to a private individual who controls both sides of the case. And according to the amicus brief filed by former IRS officials and cited across multiple outlets, there are massive legal problems with Trump's lawsuit, even if you ignore the conflict of interest. First, the statute of limitations. According to the Internal Revenue Code, you have 2 years from the date you discover a tax return leak to file a lawsuit. Trump's tax returns were leaked publicly in September 2020. The lawsuit was filed January 29, 2026. That is more than 5 years later. Trump's argument, according to Above the Law and NBC News reporting, is that the clock did not start until January 29, 2024, when the IRS formally notified him of the breach via letter, exactly 2 years before he filed the lawsuit. But think about that logic. The New York Times published his tax returns in September 2020. The whole world knew. Trump certainly knew. But he is arguing he did not officially discover the leak until the IRS sent him a letter 4 years later. That is the argument. Second problem. According to the amicus brief and legal analysis from Above the Law, Trump is suing the United States government for the actions of a contractor. Charles Littlejohn was not an IRS employee. He was a contractor. And according to legal precedent, the government is generally not liable for the unauthorized actions of contractors in the same way it would be for employees. That is a major legal obstacle. Third problem. The $10 billion figure, according to Bloomberg Tax and Above the Law, the statute that allows lawsuits for tax return leaks caps damages. And Trump has provided no demonstration of actual harm justifying $10 billion. In fact, according to ABC News reporting, legal experts have pointed out that Trump may have trouble showing real harm at all because since winning re-election, according to New York Times analysis, Trump and his family have enriched themselves by at least $1.4 billion through cryptocurrency investments and settlements with tech and media companies. So Trump is claiming $10 billion in damages from a tax return leak while simultaneously making $1.4 billion since returning to office. That is the damages claim. And here is what multiple legal experts quoted across these sources are saying. Under normal circumstances, this lawsuit would be dismissed quickly. Statute of limitations problems. Contractor liability problems, wildly excessive and unsubstantiated damages. Any other plaintiff would lose this case at the pleading stage. But this is not any other plaintiff. This is the President of the United States, who controls the Department of Justice, who controls the lawyers defending the case, which is why watchdog groups are in federal court right now arguing that the judge must intervene to prevent what they are calling an unconstitutional settlement. According to Cruz's brief, the court should stay the entire lawsuit until Trump leaves office, block any settlement while Trump is president. Because as long as Trump controls both sides of the litigation, there is no way to ensure the settlement is legitimate rather than collusive. And here is the part that reveals just how brazen this scheme is. According to reporting from NBC News and ABC News, Trump has said publicly that if he wins or settles the case, he will give the money to charity. Quote, I think what we will do is do something for charity. We could make it a substantial amount. Nobody would care because it is going to go to numerous very good charities. Nobody would care $10 billion of taxpayer money, and nobody would care as long as it goes to charity, except we do not know which charities. We do not know if Trump controls those charities. We do not know if Trump's family benefits from those charities. And we have no mechanism to verify any of this because Trump controls both sides of the lawsuit. And in case you think Congress might step in, here is what is happening there. According to CPA Practice Advisor reporting from February 11th, Senator Ron Wyden of Oregon introduced a bill to block Trump from receiving any payout by levying a 100% tax on it. But according to the same reporting, the legislation is unlikely to move given Republicans' majority in the Senate, so Congress cannot stop it. The DOJ will not stop it because the Attorney General says she works at Trump's directive. And the only hope is that a federal judge in Florida decides to block the whole thing. According to Common Cause and Bloomberg Tax, if this settlement goes through, if Trump successfully transfers $10 billion from the Treasury to himself through a lawsuit he controls on both sides, the precedent would be catastrophic. Any future president could sue their own government, control the defense, settle for whatever amount they want, and claim it is going to charity or the public good or whatever justification sounds acceptable. And think about what $10 billion actually means. According to Bloomberg Tax's analysis, spending that $10 billion in the public interest would triple the amount allocated for fixing U.S. bridges in dire need of repair. Or it could reverse the serious cuts to Affordable Care Act subsidies. That is not abstract money. That is infrastructure, health care, taxpayer funds Trump wants transferred to himself. According to the amicus brief from former IRS officials, this case is extraordinary because the president controls both sides of the litigation. On one side, he is the plaintiff demanding money. On the other side, he controls the DOJ that would defend against paying that money. And the Attorney General has explicitly said she works at his directive. That is not adversarial litigation. That is collusion. And according to these former officials, collusive litigation threatens the integrity of the judicial process by risking the court's entanglement in an illegitimate proceeding. Now, you might ask, what does the judge do? According to legal experts quoted in Above the Law and NBC News, there are a few options. The court could stay the case until Trump leaves office. the court could appoint independent counsel to represent the government's interests instead of letting Trump's DOJ do it. The court could strike the $10 billion demand as legally unsupportable, or the court could dismiss the entire case on statute of limitations grounds. But here is the problem with all of those options. According to Rule 41 of the Federal Rules of Civil Procedure, both parties can agree to dismiss a lawsuit without court approval. So even if the judge tries to manage the case carefully, Trump and his own DOJ could just agree to settle and dismiss before the judge can intervene. That is why the watchdog groups are asking the judge to issue orders preventing any settlement or dismissal without court approval, to essentially lock down the case so Trump cannot just pay himself and walk away. And this is all happening while Trump faces other massive conflicts. According to reporting we have verified earlier, Trump is threatening to withdraw from USMCA. His State Department is funding opposition to European Union law. He threatened to block a bridge Canada paid for. He is being sued by the BBC with a trial date set for next year. Every front shows the same pattern, using government power for personal benefit or personal grievance. But the IRS lawsuit is the most direct. $10 billion, taxpayer money, both sides controlled by the same person, Attorney General saying she works at his directive, and Trump openly saying he will settle with himself. According to Crew, Public Citizen, Common Cause, Democracy Forward, and former IRS officials, this cannot be allowed to proceed while Trump is in office. The conflict is insurmountable. The risk of collusion is certain, and the damage to public trust in the judicial system would be permanent. The brief was filed yesterday. The case is pending, and the judge will have to decide whether the president can sue his own government, control both sides, and settle for $10 billion. Trump said it himself very clearly and explicitly. I am supposed to work out a settlement with myself. And the only remaining question now is whether a federal judge will actually let him do it.